Hi, I'm Tom Miggott from Tom Miggott Photography. In our previous episode we covered the three important factors in an exposure: the ISO, the shutter speed and the aperture. We also said that no matter which setting you choose, if you increase or reduce it by one stop, you will either increase by 2 or reduce by half the amount of light captured by the medium, whether it's a film or a sensor in a digital camera. I'm often asked, "Hey Tom, what should be my ISO, my shutter speed and my aperture?" Well, unfortunately, there's a boring answer for this. It depends. It depends on the situation you're trying to capture. In most digital camera nowadays, they would have a light metering system built in. And I'm not going to cover in detail what the light metering system is, but just to know that it assesses the brightness level of your situation and gives you what should be your ISO, your shutter speed and your aperture. So I've done a little experiment here. I set up my camera to a full automatic mode and I let the light metering system assess the situation. And then I took the shot and let's have a closer look at what I got. As you can see, my light metering system chose an ISO of 800, an aperture of 5.6 and a shutter speed of 20th of a second. As we can also see is that this picture is well exposed. What does well exposed mean? Well, well exposed means that the brightness level is balanced between the darks and the whites. But what I believe is that it's not the only combination of ISO, shutter speed and aperture that would be correct to obtain a correct, well exposed exposure. So I've done a little experiment of my own. I switched my camera from the automatic mode to the full manual one. I kept the same setting, ISO 800, aperture 5.6 and shutter speed 1/20th. Then I decided to change my aperture from 5.6 to 4, which means that the aperture is wider than my original one. So I keep the same ISO of 800, but if I keep the same shutter speed, I'm gonna end up having an overexposed image. Since I increased my aperture by 1 stop, I decided to reduce the shutter speed by 1 stop. That's how I get 1/40th of a second. If you compare this new picture to the previous one, they are pretty much identical. And they're well exposed. And they do not have the same value. So then I did another shot. And in that one, I decided to even increase even more the aperture by 1 stop. So I went from f4 to f2.8. I kept again the same ISO of 800, but then as you would understand by now, my shutter speed cannot stay this way because it would be overexposed again. So I had to reduce my shutter speed by half, 1/80th of a second. Absolutely identical to the two before. Different setting though. Let's do another test. I'll keep the aperture at 2.8 because it's a good one. Now I'm going to reduce the ISO from ISO 800 to ISO 200. If I reduce 800 by 1 stop, I obtain ISO 400. By another stop, ISO 200. It means that I reduced my ISO by 2 stops. I didn't change my aperture, so I need to slow my shutter speed by 2 stops as well. My previous setting was 1/80th of a second, so I need to reduce that by 2 stops, meaning 1/40th of a second, that's 1 stop, 1/20th of a second, that's 2 stops. So if we compare now all those exposure with different settings, they're all equal, but they have different settings. This must be a lot to digest, I admit. However, if there is one thing you should remember from this, is that there isn't a unique combination of ISO, shutter speed and aperture for one given situation. As a matter of fact, I reckon there are about 7. While photography is all about capturing light, its goal has never been to achieve a correct exposure. It's only been a mean. The goal of photography is to share with the viewer an idea, a concept, a feeling. In our future episode, we cover the creative power of aperture and shutter speed to bring creativity, to enhance the message, the idea, the feeling behind your photograph. And until next time, this is Tom Migot saying, if you like it, capture it.